welcome to a special winter episode of a podcast about murder. I'm Jem, and I'm here with Freya to discuss a very famous case today, the murder of JonBenét Ramsey. I'm going to start with an overview of the case and the events leading up to today. Then Freya will take over with the many theories surrounding this bizarre case.
It's a Christmas episode. It's a happy holidays episode, but it's not a happy subject.
Mm-hmm. No, it's not.
But is it fair to say we're both like, this is a really famous case? It's really interesting. It's one I thought about doing, and I just thought it's done so many times. But then Christmas rolls around. It's kind of like the time that it happened.
It's that time of the year
it's
again.
Topical. I didn't check how many years it's exactly been now since it happened.
It's been 23, because it was the same year that I was born.
Oh. Weird.
So it's easy for me to remember.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a departure from how we usually do cases. For starters, it's not a European case, obviously. I think most people are familiar with it, but it's a US case. So that'll be the first time that we cover one
Across
of those.
the pond.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to start with, you're going to go through the case as it is, so like the timeline, and then I'll discuss the theories, and we'll discuss them after.
So it's a special episode because we're sharing the work.
Sharing is actually caring.
And it's the holidays, which is really what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly.
JonBenét Ramsey was born on the 6th of August 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia. Her parents were John and Patricia, or Patsy Ramsey, and she had an older brother, Burke. Her parents were, I would say, fairly wealthy. John Ramsey was a multimillionaire businessman.
Yeah, that's fairly wealthy.
My note actually said extremely, and then I thought that was too strong a word.
No, I don't think so.
Patsy Ramsey entered her daughter in a number of child beauty pageants, and as a result of her success, JonBenét became something of a minor child celebrity. On the 26th of December 1996, JonBenét was discovered murdered in the basement of her home. She was only 6 years old. Having awoken early that morning, Patsy Ramsey discovered a ransom note on the stairs demanding $118,000 in exchange for her daughter's return. The note begins, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter." It sort of goes on to describe how the money needs to be delivered, the amount of bills and how to split it up, and how the exchange will go down. Before specifying that any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for a proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you to not provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police or FBI, will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert the bank authorities, she dies. So I just wanted to read that part because it's so specific about her being beheaded. Which is, we'll get into that, I guess. But that's not how she was murdered.
No.
And the last paragraph of the ransom note is, "Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory, SBTC." Despite the note's warning not to contact the police, Patsy immediately alerted 911 to report her daughter missing, as she was unable to find her in the house. She also reached out to several friends and family members to ask for their help in searching for her missing child. The police arrived at the house at 5:55 a.m. The investigators found no signs of forced entry, but crucially did not search the basement during their initial investigation. This was because the door was locked from the outside, meaning the kidnapper couldn't have escaped that way. The ransom note was, of course, carefully examined. John Ramsey explained the suspiciously precise amount the would-be kidnappers were demanding, almost the exact amount he had received as a work bonus earlier that year, suggesting either colleagues or someone close to the family. Investigators also considered that it may be a reference to Psalm 118. I'm not familiar with Psalms, so I looked it up, and the first line is, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, because his mercy endureth forever." So at 2.5 pages, the note stood out for its unusual length. It contained numerous spelling errors and an excessive amount of exclamation marks and initialisms. The only fingerprints found on the note belonged to Patsy, adding to the police's suspicions that the note was staged. Furthermore, the note itself, as well as a practice draft, were found to have been written with a pen and paper from the Ramsey home. Following handwriting analyses, John Ramsey was cleared, whereas Patsy's sample was deemed inconclusive. Other than the note, however, there was little evidence the police could go by. Believing it to be a kidnapping, police only cordoned off JonBenét's bedroom. Concerned family and friends were allowed to walk about the house freely, disturbing any potential evidence that may have been present. Detectives asked John and a family friend to search the house to see if anything seemed off. The two began their search in the basement, where they discovered the tragic scene of JonBenét's dead body, her wrists bound, cord around her neck, and duct tape over her mouth. She was partially covered by a blanket. John Ramsey carried her upstairs, therefore compromising most of the forensic evidence present at the scene and on her body. The autopsy revealed that JonBenét's cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma, as her skull had been fractured in addition to the obvious use of a homemade garrote to strangle her. They were able to determine that the strangulation took place roughly an hour after the head trauma. The garrote used to strangle the child was made from nylon cord and one of Patsy's paintbrushes. Part of the paintbrush was found in a tub of Patsy's art supplies, although another missing part was never found.
It's interesting that you say about the time difference. I didn't know it was such a large difference. That's quite a long time, an hour, for you
I
to
didn't know that
hit
either.
someone and then, hard, and then...
And then decide to strangle them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I remember... I think that the head wound was so bad that she was immediately knocked out.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well.
The autopsy also revealed traces of a vegetable or fruit material, thought to be pineapple, which was backed up by photographs of the Ramsey home taken on the day of JonBenét's death that showed a bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table, despite John and Patsy's statements that they had no recollection of putting the bowl on the table or feeding their daughter pineapple. Fingerprints on the bowl were found to belong to Burke, JonBenét's older brother, 9 at the time of the crime. DNA from 2 males and 1 female was found under JonBenét's fingernails, although it was too degraded to determine its source. That's to say, they couldn't figure out if it was skin or blood or anything else.
Right.
All investigators were able to determine was that it did not match the male DNA found on JonBenét's underwear. Although there was no evidence of quote-unquote conventional rape.
Yeah, I read that phrase as well.
It's icky. Experts were unable to rule out sexual assault. No semen was found, although there was evidence of a vaginal injury, and a pathologist noted that her vaginal area appeared to have been wiped clean. While some claim that JonBenet may have suffered from some kind of chronic sexual abuse prior to her death, there is little evidence to actually support this theory. The initial investigation focused on the 3 remaining Ramsey family members, John, Patsy, and Burke. They were asked by police to provide handwriting, blood, and hair samples. John and Patsy were interviewed together for over 2 hours, and Burke was interviewed separately in the following weeks. Numerous errors made during the initial investigation complicated the discovery of the perpetrator of this awful crime. Evidence was lost or compromised, shared with the Ramseys themselves, and there was a notable lack of experienced and technical staff on site due to the event happening over Christmas. So now I'm going to get into the sort of ongoing investigation and a few key events that have happened since 1996. Although over 1,600 people were considered persons of interest in this case by 1997,
wow.
The Ramsey family was still the main focus of the investigation. In September 1998, a grand jury attempted to indict the Ramseys, putting forward charges of child endangerment leading to her death and obstructing the investigation of her murder. However, they were never prosecuted, as the Boulder County District Attorney at the time, Alex Hunter, considered there wasn't enough evidence to support these charges. In 2002, John and Patsy Ramsey released a book describing their experience of these events called The Death of Innocence. In 2006, Mark Karr was arrested in Bangkok following his confession. He claimed that he had drugged and sexually assaulted JonBenet before accidentally murdering her. However, his claims were soon proven to be false, as there was no evidence of drugs present in JonBenet's system, added to the fact that Karr could only provide facts that were public knowledge. And I also think it was proven that he wasn't even in Boulder at the time.
I've got that as well, yeah. That's what I've got.
So,
or that they couldn't, I had some sources say that they proved that he wasn't there, and then other sources say they couldn't prove he was there. So, I mean, those two things are
is...
very different. If you can't prove he was there,
Yeah.
doesn't mean he wasn't. If you can prove he wasn't there, that's a whole other thing. We'll talk about him again in a bit, I think.
Yeah. On June 24th of the same year, Patsy Ramsey died of ovarian cancer. She was buried next to her daughter. In 2008, Mary Lacey, another district attorney of Boulder County, took over the investigation. Well, she'd taken it over in 2002. But in 2008, they announced new DNA testing techniques that excluded the Ramseys as suspects, and she publicly exonerated them. Many have questioned the legitimacy of this exoneration, seemingly based on an almost insignificantly small piece of evidence, due to the questionable nature of touch DNA in a context of a crime scene that had been heavily disturbed. In 2010, Boulder police reopened this case, conducting new interviews and using cutting-edge DNA technology. Although these new interviews revealed nothing new, the case remains ongoing. As 2016 marked the 20-year anniversary of JonBenét's death, many specials and documentaries were produced for the occasion. Notably, Burke Ramsey broke his silence in an interview with Dr. Phil, which drew mixed reactions from the public, many criticizing his demeanor and behavior throughout the interview. The main comment I found was that he would sort of laugh and smile at inappropriate moments, but some put that down to sort of social anxiety. The case of JonBenét Ramsey aired on CBS. I read that during this documentary, a criminologist, Werner Spitz, performed a demonstration using wigs on fake skulls, demonstrating how a heavy torch could have been used to inflict the head trauma suffered by JonBenét. The documentary so heavily implied that Burke was the murderer that he filed a $750 million lawsuit against CBS. This case was eventually settled in 2019. To this day, the murder of JonBenét Ramsey remains unsolved. Investigators and members of the public generally tend to give credence to one of two main theories: the family member theory and the intruder theory, which I think Freya will get into now.
Yeah. My boyfriend's at home today, and he is watching Jingle All the Way, the film with Arnold Schwarzenegger next door. So I hope that nobody can hear that, but I just thought I'd point that out just in case I hear it in the in the editing. So I'm sorry if that comes through. He loves that stupid film. Okay. So there's so many theories surrounding this case. I couldn't really talk about everything. I mean, I have so much more. I've written enough about the theories that is basically a whole episode's worth of writing that I would normally do. So, you know, we'll see. But there's things that you've mentioned that might negate some of the things that I've written. So we'll just go through it and see how it goes. And maybe we can talk a bit about what we think is most likely or most compelling to each of us. But we'll go through it in the order. I mean, there's not an order. It's just how I...
Yeah.
Far and away the most popularly discussed theory, it seems to me, is that JonBenét was killed by her parents, or that her parents are in some way responsible for the death, and then covered it up. The lack of footprints in the snow outside the home, while not concrete evidence alone, tends to make people think that this wasn't an outsider incident, but rather something that happened within the home, and also the door being locked, like you said.
Yeah. For me, that's like a massive...
it's huge.
Mark against them, because that just makes no sense.
There are, like, how did she get down there? And then, unless, you could say it's possible that the parents, without knowing, they came downstairs and they locked the door. I mean, I don't know, it still doesn't
But if your child is missing, and your child's been missing since you woke up and immediately knew she was missing, you wouldn't be wandering about your house going like, well, that's weird, it's unlocked, better lock that. Like, you would pop your head in.
If you thought it was odd, if you normally kept the basement door locked and it was unlocked and your child was missing, I'd be down there straight away. There are many theories on the way in which the parent angle would have occurred, whether it's one parent or the other parent or both in varying degrees. So, Patsy. The theory here is that Patsy was unnecessarily strict and controlling with JonBenét behind her pleasant suburban mum persona. It's been claimed that Patsy was pushy with JonBenét's beauty pageant career, can you call it? I guess it is a career.
Yeah.
And some people would criticise this as sort of sexualisation of a young child as well. There's a lot of controversy about American beauty pageants, especially looking at it from European culture. I think a lot of people from not America look down, think this is a little bit of a weird thing. because it's not really done outside of the US as far as I know. I think they might do them in South America, but according to some speculation, JonBenét had a bedwetting issue, which led to Patsy accidentally killing her daughter as she doled out some sort of physical abuse as punishment. The blunt force trauma to JonBenét's head is said to have resulted from Patsy shoving or slamming JonBenét into the side or corner of a surface such as a sink or a bath. Additionally, the paintbrush used to make the garrote that killed JonBenét was from Patsy's painting kit, as you mentioned, though of course any suspect could have grabbed this. That doesn't necessarily indicate her.
That's the thing. If you think that it's not a family member, then it's someone who's been in the house and used their stationery to write a note. So, I mean, once you've done that, it's easy to grab a paintbrush and use that.
Yeah, that alone isn't like, you know, it doesn't really point to Patsy, in my opinion, at all. But it's just a note that it was her item. According to the Patsy killed JonBenét theory, Patsy or Patsy with the help of John then cover up the death by staging a kidnapping. Patsy was the one who discovered the bizarrely long ransom note. The former co-leading investigator from Boulder PD, Steve Thomas, speculated that Patsy wrote the note after killing JonBenét by accident. The random note.
It is that.
The ransom note was analysed, and it was said to have been written by a woman. I have no idea how they could really know this for sure. I'm sure that this isn't exactly scientific. But this is what handwriting experts have said on this, and some have compared it with the handwriting of Patsy, as you said. The note's odd contents also arouse suspicion. It goes on and on with strange, unnecessary information about the kidnappers. Paper came from inside the house, which means the kidnappers didn't come in with a note prepared. They wrote this long note.
There's a draft.
Yeah, and I think they showed that on the pad there was like the indentations of multiple practices. So that means that they spent a long time writing this very long note while inside the house while the family was sleeping, which seems stupidly risky and doesn't really make any sense, to be honest. That's without the elephant in the room, which is obviously she's killed in the house. So all this talk of accidental killing, and yet she's garroted. How intentional can you get? Like, she was strangled after the beating. So, I don't know. So it's like, I get, it could have started as an accident. But you can't, like, there's a lot of these theories talk about people accidentally killing her, and I don't really get that. I mean, it starts obviously as an accident, like, that makes sense, but in the end, she's murdered intentionally by somebody. Anyway, Patsy's 911 call has also been called into question, and we will get into that a bit later. In any case, Patsy died in 2006 of cancer, taking anything she knew with her. So there's that. And now we'll move on to John. JonBenét Ramsey. It's usually the strange behaviour of the parents that has led to speculation on their involvement, and John did act oddly indeed. After the police had searched the house, John apparently made straight for the basement and found JonBenét very quickly. This house is enormous. The basement is unused, according to the family.
I mean, in his defence, I'm just going to,
No, that's fair.
Because the whole reason he's searching the house is that police are like, why don't you go around and look for anything that's off? And I don't, maybe there's a logical part where you're like, well, let's start from the bottom up, and we're going to do this, methodically.
Well, I did write, I guess he could have suddenly thought of it as a place to look. I can sort of get it, but, I'm just pointing out that some people think it's strange that he went straight for the basement and found her very quickly.
Immediately.
John is asked not to disturb the scene in the house, yet he picks up the body, carries it upstairs, takes the tape off her mouth, and covers her with a blanket, all of which completely destroys the scene. And I get it. Again, it's like, you've just found your daughter murdered, you're not in your right mind, you're probably freaking out.
Yeah, it must
you
be
want to
horrible.
take the tape off her mouth because it's horrible to see her like that. I get it, but it's still like, you got to mention it anyway. A detective claims he overheard John making arrangements for the family to fly to Atlanta only hours after his daughter had been found dead. John admitted to this, saying that he wanted to return to Atlanta where the family had lived previously, and that detectives had told them to leave the house. Of course, the detective said, yeah, we told you that you needed to leave the house, not the state.
Yeah.
So there's that. Linda, and I cannot pronounce this last name, Ardndt, Arndt. She was the first police officer who arrived at the Ramsey house, and she stated that she is suspicious of the family and that John's behaviour made her feel that he knew too much about the murder. She also questioned the fact that the Ramseys let the deadline for the ransom in the note, which was 10, pass by without protest, which seems unusual for parents who... This is before, I think, the body was found. Which seemed unusual for parents who were wealthy and apparently believed their daughter was held by kidnappers for money.
Yeah.
Speaking of the money, as you said, the amount requested by the kidnappers was said to be the exact same amount as John Ramsey's Christmas bonus. But this boggles my mind, because why would John or Patsy write this amount? It's too bizarre. It almost makes me think it wasn't them.
And then they were very insistent on the fact that it had to be one of his colleagues or someone who had the information. That
is purposefully, like, they've done that going, Matt will link it to someone at work. But the whole bonus thing, it just adds an extra level of bizarre to the whole thing. Because the other thing is, if you know someone's getting over $100,000 for their Christmas bonus, you know they're a heck of a lot richer than that. So why not ask for more?
Well, yeah.
Then that kind of makes me go, I flip-flop right back to it being them, because they've used that specific amount to try and show that it was someone at work without realizing that if it was someone else, they would know he was wealthier than that and they would ask for more. So now I'm back to Patsy wrote the note. So
yeah, this is the thing about this whole case where it's like, but what about this? And it's suddenly like the complete opposite.
Some speculation began to arise about John abusing JonBenét. This coincided with the supposed evidence of sexual assault on JonBenét's body, which is disputed, as you say. It seems it's not conclusive whether or not she was assaulted in that way. Certainly there was no, and I've put rape in a conventional sense, which is, what you said as well. But other types of assault were not ruled out. Some say she showed a history of sexual abuse, which you also mentioned.
This is what I read, is that a few experts agreed that there were signs of ongoing sexual abuse rather than a sexual assault that had occurred once at the time of her death.
But there's no heavy detail on that or conclusive finding, really. The DNA found on JonBenét's underwear is brought up a lot, and it's very clouded with hearsay and incorrect reporting as to what that DNA was. Some say it was a spot of blood, some say it was semen, but the most up-to-date word on this seems to be that it was touch DNA left by handling. It can be anybody, and it doesn't have to be related to the case. Some have said this could have been left by the person who packaged the underwear in the factory. That's how innocuous it could be. Which makes it all the more bizarre that in 2008, analysis of this DNA was used to prove the Ramseys couldn't have killed her or been involved in her death, which I find absolutely bizarre.
Well, that's the whole thing, the controversy of the DA clearing them and like publicly apologizing.
Right. The Boulder police officially apologized and cleared the couple as the DNA didn't match them. I said, I'm saying boggles too many times, but this is even more boggling than whatever I said was boggling before. Because, I mean, you have this one sample that could have been anybody, and that's proof they did nothing. No way. What kind of detective work is that? Is this just me? I mean, anyway, they were cleared. Patsy didn't live to see them be cleared in 2008. Interestingly, in 2013, it was revealed that back in 1999, the district attorney of Boulder, Alex Hunter, had misled the press in a conference by implying that the grand jury had decided not to indict JonBenét's parents for murder. In fact, the grand jury had decided there was enough to charge the Ramseys, but the DA had himself decided not to.
That's what I read. That's why I was suddenly like,
A former Boulder police officer has claimed that the DA's office, quote, did not want to hear that an affluent member of the community was guilty of a crime like this, and that the office intentionally chose not to solve the crime. So there's that. It's claimed that the Ramseys purposely called their friends to search the house before police as they knew it would contaminate the scene. They hired lawyers fast and avoided interviews. It's up for debate what you think about whether that shows guilt or not. But of course, it begs the question why they would try to cover up their daughter's death, why they went such lengths. Personally, I don't find it hard to acknowledge the reality that parents can and do kill their children purposefully or by accident and go to lengths to save their own skin. But that is rare.
And it's also rare that I read that someone pointed out that it's rare that a couple would cover for each other to that degree in the death of a child.
So some have pointed out that it would follow logically if they were protecting someone else that they loved, possibly the only other child they had left. And that leads us to the next theory. Burke, as it's discussed, was 9 years old when JonBenét died. He was said to be jealous of the attention she got through her pageantry and so on. There are rumours of disturbing behaviour from Burke, including smearing feces on the walls of JonBenét's room and in her bed. And there are rumours...
I didn't know that.
Right, well, this isn't necessarily a fact. This is rumours. There are rumours of a history of violence towards her, hitting her and so on. I think a lot of kids have hit their siblings, me included. But
this is the thing. I read that he chased her down with a golf club or something. Wasn't there that? There's some kind of incident
the golf
like
club
that,
thing, yeah.
Which is extreme, but at the same time, not, I would say, unusual.
Right.
For two siblings to sort of... It can get out of hand.
It can easily get out of hand. I know it did for me. And I know, my dad once chased his sister with a knife. And he's, God, is this
Next
defamation?
week on a podcast about murder.
No, but, you can do things that seem actually quite extreme, but really it's just because you don't even understand what you're doing.
Yeah. You sort of don't understand how severe your actions can be.
But it said that Burke had given JonBenét injuries that required her to be taken to A&E or the ER, which is quite extreme, and that's more than I've only done that once. That was an accident. I once shot my little brother's finger in the door. Oh my God, that was horrible. That was an accident. I wasn't trying to teach him a lesson or anything. Anyway, the theory, according to some, goes that the blunt force to JonBenét's head came from a flashlight, which Burke used to hit her, and you mentioned that. The flashlight is seen on the kitchen counter in the crime scene photos, but no trace evidence linked to either child was found on it, so they didn't find any of JonBenét's blood on the flashlight. They didn't find Burke's fingerprints on it, or anything.
Which is odd, considering the bowl of pineapple still had his fingerprints on it.
Yes.
But maybe if it's not directly tied to the murder, then you
I
wouldn't
didn't find whether they found anything on... so if you find nothing on something, that's in itself suspicious.
Oh,
but
right.
is it... I didn't find whether it had nothing on because it had been wiped down, which in and of itself is almost evidence. Or it had nothing on it. It had a bunch of stuff, but not them.
Yeah.
A forensic investigator that you mentioned earlier, Werner Spitz, claims that the flashlight fits the wound on JonBenét's head perfectly. We come to the pineapple. The undigested pineapple found in JonBenét's stomach supposedly came from a midnight snack Burke had prepared, as the bowl containing pineapple was found in the kitchen with Burke's fingerprints on it. That the children were up together in the middle of the night certainly opens up the possibility that Burke was involved or witnessed the killing. We would always go downstairs and get midnight snacks, wouldn't we? But not on a normal night, I guess.
But I guess it's Christmas night. You're sort of excited. You've had Oh, and they were getting ready for a trip. They were leaving on the 26th, which is why she was up so early.
Yes, yeah.
So maybe they're all excited about that.
So it's thought that perhaps JonBenét took a slice of pineapple, which angered Burke, who struck and killed her, either unintentionally or not. These theories were explored in the CBS documentary you mentioned, the case of JonBenét Ramsey, which Burke responded to with his $750 million lawsuit for defamation. This was settled for an undisclosed amount. Another interesting weird rumour that I couldn't substantiate is that a book was found in the Ramsey home which had content about incestual abuse between children, and it said that the part of the book about this topic was marked. So some people have speculated that JonBenét's supposed signs of being abused in the past may point towards Burke rather than John, and possibly this abuse could have culminated in her death. Obviously, that is a rumour and not actually proven by anything forensic, but that's what some people mention. Now, I think it's a time to bring up the 911 call. It would be weird not to talk about it because it's such a big thing now. People talk about it a lot more recently. It was Patsy who called 911 that morning, and the dispatcher, Kimberly Archuleta, has given a television interview in which she claims that there was something inside me that said something's not right. That's her quote. I'm going to play the 911 call in here because I think that's interesting, and some people believe it's vital.
911 emergency. Police. What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was this?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's gone.
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey. I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay,
Please, there's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy.
There is, at the end of the call, a period of time where Patsy believes she is hung up, and you can hear voices sort of in the mix of white noise. Some audio experts believe Burke is heard on the call, who Patsy and John claim was asleep at the time. You can look up on YouTube like enhanced clips of the end, and at the end, some people believe that Patsy can be heard saying variations on "What did you do? What did you do to me? What did you do to her?" and stuff like that. And that Burke can be heard saying, "Are they going to arrest me?" And I have listened to these, and I guess I'm kind of in two minds about it because it's very easy to hear it when someone's put subtitles. So I personally do hear what sounds like a male child's voice in that call. I don't know exactly what they say, but I can hear what I think is a male child. And if I have the subtitles there, I did think that I could hear, "Are they going to arrest me?" or something like that. Some people hear, "Do you still love me?" and other things like that. I do think I hear his voice, but then again, it's like I just can't say that for sure. Because even when it's enhanced, it's so crackly and distorted that it could still be, it doesn't really sound like the rest of Patsy's speech, but it could still be her. I'm not really sure. So, of course, according to this theory, one or both parents help cover up the murder, with Patsy still pegged as the writer of the ransom note. I did watch a little of the interview with Burke on Dr. Phil that happened in 2016. I did think it was strange that he smiled a lot when talking through the murder, but I did also think it could be a sort of grimace. Like, when I was looking at it, I did think it was I thought it was a nervous expression to me, more than a smile.
I would be smiling nervously, I would be laughing, and it's not, I'm not a murderer, but I'm just awkward.
Right, I've written also that I know some people do odd things when they're nervous, like smile or laugh, and that's true of me as well. But regardless, his whole vibe is a little bit weird. People have pointed out that he seems unable to maintain eye contact with Dr. Phil when he says that he didn't hit JonBenét. And that sticks out because he does seem to look at him fairly consistently until that point where he seems to be unable to look at him. But then again, you know, it's not evidence, but it's just something that I noticed. So I went back and I watched a little bit of the interviews carried out with him when he was a child, just after the murder happened.
Okay.
And this really gave me an odd feeling. He seems super detached. And I'll add a caveat that everyone, especially children, can have really odd ways of coping with trauma. So I'm not... So it's difficult. But in an interview, which appears to be with some kind of psychiatrist, carried out just 13 days after JonBenét was killed, Burke is asked if he feels safe. He replies, yes, he does, which is odd because his sister was murdered in his house by an intruder less than 2 weeks ago, according to, you know, the mainstream.
It is weird, but at the same time, maybe you don't fully understand it. But then at 9, I think I would.
Mean, yeah.
I grew up in I had a totally normal childhood, and we were never burgled or anything. But as a child, I would have that fear. So if that had actually happened, then I definitely would be, like, very paranoid about staying in my house.
Yeah, I find that a bit odd for a child. The interviewer asks if he ever worries about it, and he says no. When asked if he has any secrets, he says, I don't think I remember any, and if I did, I don't think I'd tell you. And the way he says this, it is a little bit child in a horror movie, I have to say. Like, it's so, like, there's something so weird about the way he says that. He makes little jokes, he smirks, he says he basically forgets about his sister's murder. Like, whenever someone asks him about it, he's like, oh, I just forget about it. Crucially, he sounds like he feels unrelated to her. Like, it's like he's talking about a show that he saw on TV. I don't know. For a 9, I kind of would almost see it less suspiciously if he was younger than that, but he's not. So I have to say that he acts like a killer who knows they won't be caught. Like, kind of like a serial killer in an interview, you know, like cocky. It's just weird. And I'm not the only one who thinks this, because a retired FBI profiler, Jim Clement, has said that during these interviews, Burke acted, quote, like an untruthful smart aleck.
Which is odd behaviour, even if he isn't a murderer. That kind of behaviour in that context is strange.
It is strange. So this has mostly been the theory that I lean towards, and I think it makes logical sense that the Ramsey parents would try to cover up the death to save their only remaining child. There is one other way I could try and explain this. So I just want to be fair to Burke, so I don't want to get sued for saying...
What, you don't have $750
we
million
can't afford a
spare?
$750 million lawsuit, so I just want to be fair to him. If he is innocent, it's possible that he has, coincidentally, some kind of neurological or psychological divergence that causes him to struggle to feel or express empathy, and that does not mean he killed her. That is just something that could be a complete coincidence. The way he acts to me is totally out of the realm of normal, but that doesn't mean that he killed her necessarily.
I just can't imagine what kind of a childhood he has had. They both had a very weird childhood. You're in a slightly different world due to the fact that you're so wealthy. Your sister is a pageant queen at the age of 6. That's just a very strange context to grow up in, and I can't imagine how that shapes an individual.
Yeah, and that
it is
probably
possible
had a big impact on him, and possibly he is just detached like that, and that's just who he is. So I just wanted to just say that it's possible that that's just his character, and that doesn't mean he doesn't love her, or that he wasn't upset, but that he didn't know how to express it, or he couldn't feel the same things.
Because I remember his statements that his mum sort of woke him up coming into his room in a panic, obviously looking for her daughter. And he woke up and stayed in bed because he didn't want to know what was going on. Like, he just sort of wanted to detach himself from the whole situation, which sort of is indicative of his character in general. Everything he said about it sort of paints him as an outsider who's not really involved in anything.
Yeah, and that's probably how he felt day to day. So
Yeah.
so I'm seeing now your sort of like thing about has his sort of status as the child that isn't JonBenét, essentially, has that formed him into this person that sees himself as an outsider to the family, and in a way that sort of fits in with how he conducts himself.
I do think that there are a lot of suspicious elements that point at the parents being somehow involved. And the only way I can explain those is that they're defending their son.
The parents' actions all make perfect sense in context where Burke committed the murder, to me. That's just how it just makes perfect sense. I should also mention, although I think it's meaningless, the touch DNA on JonBenét's underwear did not match Burke either, but I don't think that matters. As I've said, I think that's nonsense, and I don't think that means anything. So, John Mark Karr, who you brought up, a school teacher arrested on multiple charges, including child pornography, claimed that he was in the Ramsey house the night of the murder. And his first claim, apparently, was that he saw her die but wasn't the one who murdered her. He said, quote, "I was with her when she died, but I was not the person who caused it." And he said he staged the crime scene in order to throw the police off the track of the real killer, who he continued to claim that he knew who it was but wouldn't say. Then he apparently changed his story, claiming he killed JonBenét after abusing her, which he described in horrendous detail.
Because I always thought he was like, I would never do that to her, because like he was sort of in love with her.
The way he'd written it was like he loved her and she was a consenting adult, basically. It was just a really weird, really strange. Anyway, he was arrested in 2006, but in the end he was cleared. None of his DNA was found at the scene, but beyond that, police believed he wasn't even in Boulder at the time, like we said.
Yeah.
Karr continued to insist that he was the killer, but he was dismissed as basically seeking fame. There's not really much more to say on him. I think he's just, I don't think he did it. I think he is basically just a scummy paedophile who just wants attention.
Yeah.
So, the Santa Claus. 2 nights before JonBenét was killed, a Santa Claus impersonator named Bill McReynolds was at the Ramsey house dressed as Santa. He reportedly gave JonBenét a card that said, "You will receive a very special gift after Christmas." The vagueness of this message has led some to believe that he was behind the murder. I think that's bloody ridiculous. Because that's what anybody writes in a card.
Yeah, but I do find it weird that it's after Christmas, not on. That's the thing I have an issue with. But
I get what you're saying, but I just think it's a little bit vague. Anyway.
well, it's certainly not enough to say, like, lock this man away.
No, it's not evidence. However, I do think that a stranger from outside the home who wants jobs that get them close to kids is a good suspect to look into, right? So it's not that he shouldn't be looked into. A Santa is a damn good paedophile job, I'll tell you that. It's a good one to get you where you need to be for your reasons. But Bill claimed he was innocent, of course. He died in 2002, and a weird story that I read was that he asked for his
ashes to be mixed with glitter that she had given him or something.
Apparently that he asked this of his wife. I do not know where this rumour came from, because it's in the media, but there's no, like...
Yeah.
I don't know what the source is for this. It's a weird one. But anyway, he's dead now, so if he did it, that's that. Now, here's some kooky ones. An animal killed her. Animal hairs were found on JonBenét's body and on the tape covering her mouth, leading some to the belief that a wild animal killed her. They suggest an owl or a beaver, but there is no explanation offered in this theory.
Dexterous beaver to like tie a child up and then put tape on her mouth.
Right, there is no explanation offered in this theory for how an owl would go about taping somebody's mouth, creating a garrote, or basically anything that's found at the scene. Next, she is Katy Perry.
Yep.
In 2014, it was alleged in a YouTube video that JonBenét's parents did stage not only her kidnapping, but her death as well. Some people believe that JonBenét is alive and living her life as famous pop star Katy Perry. This theory claims that the two look alike and that lyrics from Katy's songs hint at her true identity. I'm not sure which ones. They do look a little similar around the eye area.
Well, they've both got big blue eyes.
Yeah. When I look at JonBenét, I see the bottom of half of her face coming out very differently to how Katy Perry's does. So anyway, I'm not sure about them looking too similar for it to be a coincidence. The original YouTube video was created by a guy called Dave Johnson, a conspiracy theorist known for making quite wild claims. He is one of those truther types. And as you can sort of surmise from that, he isn't thought to be particularly credible. Naysayers say that ages do not match up on this theory as well, to the tune of 10 years difference. But of course, I'm sure a conspiracy theorist would argue that Katy could lie about her birth date to conceal her identity. In the video, Dave claims nobody died, nobody got hurt. That sacrifice was in name only, and it was to get something, and that something was to become a star. JonBenét became Katy Perry, and that's a fact.
But
I'll let people come to their own conclusions about that. I don't know how much sense it makes to fake your daughter's death so she can return as a famous pop star. He seems to be suggesting that in some way the sacrifice of JonBenét's previous identity is like a sacrifice, you know, and then it gave her the power to become like a worldwide star or something. It's a weird one. So finally, we'll go for the intruder theory, which is obviously what the parents claim and what a lot of people believe, and new suspects and the serial killer theory as well. Bob Whitson, a retired Boulder detective, told Dateline that a sexually sadistic person and psychopath most likely killed JonBenét. Obviously, if JonBenét wasn't killed by someone in her family or within her home, she must have been killed by someone who forced their way into the home and carried out the murder without anyone hearing them. John Ramsey said he had broken the window in the basement, which was broken, which obviously was broken, because he broke it, but that was the only point of entry, really, that would make sense for an intruder. Reenactments have been done, by many people. It's inconclusive, though, on whether someone could have... It's physically possible to enter through the window. That's not really in dispute. But it's been claimed that there was a spider web over the window, which was not disturbed in the way that it would have been had someone entered that way recently. But if the door to the basement is locked, how do you get in and out through there? How does JonBenét get into the basement and then somebody locks it? I don't know.
I don't know what this cobweb looked like. Do you know what I mean? Like, is it one that has clearly been there for ages? Or is it one that could have just, it could have happened after the murder? The way that people call it a cobweb, rather than a spider web, quite a lot, which makes me think it's old. But at the same time, if it's not old, I know how bloody fast they can build a web. It happens instantly. They build them over very, very little time, an hour, you know, and then it's like... Well, yeah, so I don't know how much I would count on that.
So there was a suitcase. The suitcase had a footprint on it that was from a shoe that seemingly doesn't match family. Some people claim that it was from a pair Burke owned, but I can't substantiate this at all. But of course he lives in the house, so he's going to step on stuff.
Yeah.
It's not that odd. Anyway, perhaps the strangest thing is that the Ramseys deny owning the suitcase. The suitcase apparently... This is so strange. My mind is boggled again. We're boggling again. The suitcase contained a semen-encrusted blanket and a Dr. Seuss book.
Oh.
Yeah,
I don't like this.
You heard what you heard. This is supposedly, this is so weird, traced to John Ramsey's oldest son from a previous marriage, who could be proved... Right, so he could be proved not to have been in Boulder at the time, according to police. But I don't even know what to say about that, except that there's so much weird shit going on in this case. On top of everything else that we've just talked about, you've got this older son seemingly getting off to Dr. Seuss in a basement. What is happening?
And leaving it there.
Now, When I was reading this and I was thinking, okay, well, the media do tend to sort of sensationalize. When you say stuff like a semen-encrusted blanket, that makes it sound like this blanket is just covered in semen. But that doesn't necessarily, what if the Dr. Seuss book is unrelated, it's just in the suitcase, he's done what he's done or whatever, and he's just put it in there. I mean, men really are disgusting, so... Anyway, a paedophile named Gary Oliver, or... Oliver.
I've heard
like
Oliver, but I'm not sure.
He's serving a 10-year sentence for child porn charges, so he's a piece of shit. He is reported to have admitted to killing JonBenét. This came out early this year, apparently. According to an old friend of Gary's who received letters from him, I mean, why? I kind of feel like you should stop having old friends. When you become, like, why is anyone accepting that, like, your letters and shit? I don't know. So in these letters to his old friend, he confessed to the killing. Gary also revealed that he planned to eat JonBenét after the killing. Allegedly, he writes that, I never loved anyone like I did JonBenét, and yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half, and I watched her die. It was an accident. Now, this does not fit with the autopsy. Either he didn't do it, or he's trying to make it sound less horrendous by saying it was an accident and not admitting to the strangulation.
But it's like that whole thing of they've obviously got a very twisted vision of the world, and in their mind, maybe it's an accident.
Boulder police are apparently investigating this paedophile's claims. But I'm stuck on the door being locked. I'm stuck on the long note that doesn't make any sense. He doesn't talk about writing a ransom note.
That's the thing. With the intruder theory, I just can't understand the ransom note. There are so many elements that point to it being staged.
Others have speculated that the intruder could have been a serial killer. 12 years before JonBenét was murdered, another girl called Tracy Neef was abducted on her way to school and killed in Thornton, Colorado. Apparently not very far from Boulder or where the Ramseys lived. Her death was linked to brothers called Todd and Aaron Schonlau. Aaron, who had a history of paedophilic activity, ended up going to prison for the murder of a third girl named Lacey Ruff. JonBenét, Tracy, and Lacey are said to resemble each other. Todd Schonlau went on to allegedly tell a girlfriend that he had done something terrible, which she took to mean that he had some involvement in the murder that his brother had been convicted of. So the theory here is that these are serial killing paedophile duo of brothers who have killed JonBenét, Tracy, Neef, and Lacey Ruff. Other non-family theories include an electrician tied to a property dispute with the Ramseys, and this is what the Ramseys' own personal investigator was investigating.
Right.
This guy committed suicide 2 days after the Boulder police made an announcement in 1997 that they were looking into a new suspect.
Oh, okay.
And then he kills himself. There were also rumours, unsubstantiated, of there being a large-scale child abuse ring in Boulder that had something to do with the killing. That's been explored a little bit there was a documentary on Netflix called Casting JonBenét, which was actually about almost like the making of a documentary in a way, but they were talking to people from Boulder about what they thought happened and what the rumours were, and that was one of the things that came up in that. There's the housekeeper, who in turn, she accuses Patsy, and she says that according to the housekeeper, Patsy had a temper, that she had another personality to her and could be quite aggressive, and that's what the housekeeper says. Of course, with somebody accusing somebody else, that person then has a suspicion put on them as well. Yeah. So the housekeeper has also been brought up, but there's not really I didn't find a lot on that theory. So that is it. What do you think?
The thing is, there are elements of different theories that don't seem to work by themselves. I don't actually find the intruder theory that compelling, but it is a possibility. Like, I can't rule it out, because I just find it...
No.
I guess I find it horrible to imagine that a family would be capable of doing that to their child.
There's so many things that are completely mind-boggling in this case. I kind of just think, like, a lot of people think that it will be solved at some point, and I just don't see how it could, because it's not like we're waiting to test any evidence. You know, all the DNA that's been found has been tested, and it's not conclusive in any way to anyone.
Yeah.
Lots of the major players in the case have died.
Yeah.
The only person, you know, Burke's been talking about it recently. He'd done this interview, and so it's kind of like it's still in the limelight. But I don't see this I don't see any kind of shock reveals happening in this case. Sadly, I just think it will not be solved. I can't see it being solved. I was looking forward to talking about this case because I've been very interested by it. And all the different things that go on in it. It's so huge, so much to talk about. So this will probably end up being quite a long one. But that's it. That's the case of JonBenét Ramsey. Don't forget that we are on social media at About Murder on Twitter, Instagram at A Podcast About Murder, and Facebook.com/A Podcast About Murder with no E. These are in the description box. You can find updates and other things. I just wanted to say a shout out. A couple of times we've been mentioned by people on Twitter. One is at Earons, as in EAR_ONS, which is because the account is about the East Area Rapist / Golden State Killer case. They're following that, and also they do missing persons and other true crime stuff. And also True Crime Lab, which is at the TCL podcast. Thank you for also mentioning us in your Follow Friday. Also, go to our YouTube channel, search for A Podcast About Murder on YouTube, and subscribe, because we put the blooper reel out on there, and I'm sure I'll put some other fun things out on there. Oh, another mention, our music guy is now on Spotify. So please search for Sly Beggar on Spotify and check that out. And that's basically all I have to say. Happy holidays. Have a good time.
We'll be back sometime next year. That's really vague.
No, it really depends.
Sorry.
I have so much work to do. So we'll see how fast I can write and how fast you can write, and we'll see how it goes. But hopefully at some point in January there'll be a season 2. Look forward to that. Stay tuned. Don't leave.
So stay
Subscribe, rate 5 stars, all of those.
Please don't leave.